Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle Matthews. I'm Executive Director of the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies. We're proud to have another guest on as part of the AI and COVID-19 Disinformation Initiative. This is a project supported by the OSCE's Office of the Representative on Freedom of the Media to look at the intersection of COVID disinformation, AI, and freedom of expression. So I'm very pleased today to have with us Bill Marcellino. Bill is a senior behavioral and social scientist at the RAND Corporation. Bill, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Kyle, for having me here. Excited.
So, Bill, maybe to start off with, you have a very interesting background looking at a whole bunch of different aspects of what's happening on social media. Could you maybe tell us about some of your recent work on social media disinformation?
Sure. So I think as social media has exploded and as the amount of data available to be analyzed and understood has exploded, and maybe as different state and non-state actors have increasingly used information in ways around conflict or political ends, I think we've developed our methods and our researchers, use it more and more. So a lot of our work has been involved looking at how, say, entities like Russia, I think Russia is a good example. Russia is an example of a nation that has a particular idea and concept for how it uses information for struggle. And I'm going to butcher the word. I'm not a Soviet or a Russian expert, but it's Information Protovoborsk. But we talk about information warfare or information operations, and those don't really have an analog for the Russian concept, which is this idea that there is some kind of struggle or confrontation over information. And they have a really well-developed doctrinal definition. It's about confrontation with other nations. It involves technical means of information control. It involves an integration of, say, cyber attacks with, or cyber means along with affecting populations through information and public opinion swaying. And so we've looked at a lot of that work. And a particular area we looked at recently has been interference in the US elections. So we've actually done some recent studies on the 2020 election, the 2016 election, and actually in between that for US European Command J39, we looked at information operations that Russia conducted against France during the 2018 election period, and at the same time they were having the World Cup in Moscow.
So this is fascinating. Over and over again, we're hearing about how information is used as a form of warfare, and how social media platforms have opened up, I guess, open societies like the US, Canada, many countries in Western Europe, and how they're being attacked in this way. I'm wondering, Bill, have you, any of your work, or have you seen any changes since we've dealt with the COVID pandemic? Are there any amplification of disinformation? Are you seeing any of this in your work?
So we are currently doing work on COVID and the intersection of COVID with disinformation, and I want to be careful too. I think we use disinformation as a quick, handy shortcut. And certainly there is disinformation. Like there are untrue things, like lies, whatever. But selectively using the truth, only giving part of the truth, trying to spread out the truth plus other things that aren't true. I mean, there's a lot of ways to handle it. So we've used the term malign information efforts. You got the idea that you're using information in a way that's probably not fair and not pro-social, but there's also not a lot of unity in this. If you look around the world, where Western nations, U.S. government, DOD, we're all using different terms. There isn't a really good set of clear terms for us in the English-speaking world to get a handle on this. So we'll just use disinformation for right now. But I do want to make that point that it's a pretty big, slippery topic, bigger than just disinformation. So we actually are doing some work right now that is not published yet. So I can't go into great detail because we want to make sure that our findings are properly vetted, they're quality assured. But we definitely are seeing it. And maybe an interesting thing is it's not just Russia. Other actors, for example, like China, are likely in play. But also Turkey is emerging, Iran is emerging. So maybe an important takeaway is that information operations or efforts to try and persuade and confuse, obfuscate, all of those are so cheap and relatively effective compared to the investment that there is a burgeoning market. So if Russia, and prior to that the Soviet Union with active measures, has been the long-term player, the most well-developed in theory and practice, and the most profound in their efforts, or certainly most developed in their efforts and their tactics, everyone else is getting involved. China is definitely getting involved. Turkey and Iran are the big players. So it's an opening market. And then the flip side is, if Russia has been the pioneers for going out to try and impact other countries and affect them so that their actions more benefit yours, China is probably the paradigm example and the expert at internal control with their Golden Shield program and really trying to control internal discourse and the internet inside. So I think there's sort of like two sides of a related coin. Is how do you use the internet and social media in probably unhelpful, unhealthy, uncivil ways looking out, but how do you also try and exert draconian control on the inside to control interior discourse?
That's fascinating. So I'd like to ask you, you talked about how disinformation is a pretty wide subject that's often used for many different things. One could be said that artificial intelligence is similar, that people use it to refrain also from surveillance technology to algorithms to deepfake technology and altered videos. But I'm wondering, knowing that AI is a general technology, and there are many technologies, are you seeing, or can you comment on, what is the role of AI in these disinformation campaigns? Are they being used? Are they enabling disinformation? Are they being used to fight disinformation? What's the role of AI in all of this?
Okay, and I will say that I think it'd be more useful to talk about a particular part of AI, a subset, and that is machine learning. So yeah, AI is really big and broad, and it even includes just the sort of idea of general AI, the sort of like moonshot idea that you can get a machine that thinks, in ways that are so human that they can do a lot of human stuff and are intelligent in a way comparable to the way human beings are intelligent. That's a whole separate story. So, but for machine learning, and maybe we'll just say machine learning is trying to build machines that can learn from experience or from data and figure something out to do something. So every time you use Google image search, you're using machine learning. You are counting the fact that Google has used lots and lots of pictures of cute cats and cute puppies and cute bunnies and whatever. And that algorithm has figured out when we say, cute kitten picture, it kind of knows what you mean. And it's been able to search through lots and lots of prior data to now find new ones to go, that's probably a cute kitten. And if you can see, it works pretty well. Another issue, of course, though, is that the most productive means, or the most productive approaches right now in machine learning, are deep neural networks, and those are black boxes. So here's a real issue for me as a scientist and for practitioners. Google produces services. When you go to Google Images and search for cute cat videos, all you want to see is cute cat videos. When you and I want to understand what, say, like Russian information operations are doing, we don't just want to find them. We want to understand them, maybe. How do they work? So there's this idea of interpretability. So yes, there's a large space now for AI, including particularly machine learning for this. And I think a lot of it's in the detection space right now. So when I look at the production of malign content, it's scalable right now using lots and lots of human labor. So if we go back to the Daesh and ISIS example, you had lots and lots of people, on the internet arguing over what ISIS was. Do you use a word like ISIS or ISIL, or do you use a word like Daesh, which I understand to be sort of a mocking acronym. So to the best of my understanding, if you're against ISIS, you use the word Daesh. If you're for them, you use ISIS or ISIL or the Caliphate, and that those words have stakes. And so that's a really large-scale human conversation. How do you understand it? How do you deal with it? You need machine means. There's no amount of analysts sitting, in the US or in the Western world that can get a handle on that. Or I'm sure most of the listeners and viewers here have heard of the Internet Research Agency, right? So the IRA, that is a large-scale production factory. You've got lots and lots of people who are online and who are doing, posting under multiple aliases. So when we have, for example, recently in our information or in our work on detecting foreign election interference in the 2020 election, most of the work appears to be, or a lot of the work from trolls appears to be humans that are running what we might call like troll accounts. So they're like troll herders, many accounts that are staffed by human beings pumping out information. But there may also be algorithmic work involved as well. And then there are super connected accounts that are doing lots of work together, network together, and maybe sharing information quickly and adroitly and at scale. Those are probably more like botnets. So what I would say is that on the production side, I see a lot of human work at scale and some machine learning work to make it work at scale. If we have any hope on our end, on the sort of democratic Western side of addressing it, we need machine means to scale up because we can't handle the volume of data. Does that track?
Yes, I know that tracks. And that's what I've been hearing from other people is that, yes, we have bots spreading this information. We have foreign governments taking advantage of these open platforms, but the scale of the data that's online or being uploaded every second is so much that it can't be done only by humans. So we, as you say, we're going to be needing AI in order to deal with a lot of this. Bill, I'd like to talk to you because you have a background in behavioral and social science, and so you understand how individuals might respond to this. I would like to ask you, as Western countries and private entities like big tech are trying to curtail disinformation online, they realize it's a problem. There's also a struggle in Western democracies about upholding human rights, particularly the freedom of expression. I'm wondering from your point, if you could talk about, what's the impact on individuals online when they see this disinformation? Does it impact them? Are these troll armies? Does that have an impact on individuals online to kind of be quiet if they're attacked? And is there a social science element that this impacts people's freedom of expression if they're being attacked or being fed disinformation?
Yeah, so certainly I think there's good social science to support the idea that human beings they have culture, they're social, we interact. We've all seen the effects of like internet shaming, right? Where you say something that's unpopular, people go after you. There's a famous case of a woman who posted something really unfortunate prior to landing in South Africa on a trip. And she made would have been within her private circle a ironic statement about who is vulnerable to AIDS. And by the time she landed, it had become an international sensation with a hashtag like "Has Justine landed yet?" And her life was ruined. So we know that people interact, in some similar ways online or analogous ways to offline. That there's human elements to it. Or human elements that include things like being shamed, trying to support your culture. What I think we're finding right now in a lot of our research at RAND is that a lot of the identity work that we do when we are part of a group is really visible online. So we recently did this large-scale set of studies supporting California's Office of Emergency Services looking for foreign election interference in the 2020 election. My part of that work was to do the technical means of building machine learning and other statistical means for searching for these campaigns, detecting them and understanding them. We also had an additional effort that looked at an experimental treatment to deal with it, to try and maybe help people understand and respond to it in a more positive way. And I think that's really illustrative. So my colleagues, Todd Helmus and Marek Posad, they used an experimental intervention where they showed people these panels, Russian propaganda, but also public service announcements, like lots of sort of online stuff, including memes. And one of the things they found in it is that people who identified as strongly partisan, if you were very conservative, if you're very progressive, you really liked the content aimed at you. So if you were a conservative and there's like, if you love Jesus and guns, share this, they were like, this is awesome. If it's like something like, like show your love for LGBT people and stop America from hating, and you're progressive, you're like, this is awesome. And then both groups loved pro-USA stuff, which also raises the weird question of why did Russia put out so much pro-USA content? It's kind of a weird move, but both sides like that. So on the one hand, and that's totally expected, right? I love the stuff that tells me and reinforces what my group believes, our core ideology, and I want to share it. And they were very high on liking it and wanting to share it. When we showed them the source, though, that immediately plummeted both their affect. So their emotional response went way down. They're like, that's Russian stuff. I don't like it so much now. On both sides, by the way. So both conservatives and progressives were unhappy when they learned what the source was, and their willingness to share it went way down. So I think what that gets at, or maybe illustrates, is that, yeah, human beings, as per usual, we want to reinforce group membership. We want to be a good blank, right? That's really important to human beings, and we do that really strongly online. And so that's a vulnerability, right? Showing that you're a good whatever you are. But we're not robots. We're not machines. People can just press our buttons. And for example, when we know, hey, someone's trying to manipulate us, that can be a really powerful reason to get around your cognitive biases and to try and, to not buy into it, to resist it, or you may still think it's true, that whatever that it said is accurate, but it doesn't mean you like being manipulated. Does that make some sense?
No, it makes sense. I mean, and I think when you talk about this, it brings up the whole aspect of micro-targeting and machine-driven, MADCOM's machine-driven communications, these AI-powered tools that can really scrape people's social media profiles and target them in individual manners, which is perhaps leading to my next question, is as governments, civil society, and even tech companies are struggling to deal with disinformation online, and it's seen as being a danger to democracy, to individual human rights. What do you think is the role of governments in this? What should governments, if they're looking at this problem, should be they regulating tech? Should they be focusing on digital literacy skills? Like where should we go from here?
So one thing is that the what are the most effective interventions? I don't think there's a settled question yet. We are still trying to really understand it. A big part of public policy research is I don't want to start yanking levers and then find out 10 years later, I wasted all this money and time, yanking levers that had no effect, or even worse, had like perverse effects. So we want to do this kind of research so that we don't just run off with our intuition and do the wrong thing or make things worse. So we're beginning to get some research on that. We're starting to understand some of the things. And, so for example, on digital literacy, there's some evidence that it works, that you can educate people and make them, more aware. There's also some evidence that this may not be as widespreadly effective. It may be also cultural dependent. And I'll give you an example. A place like Finland, which is held up as a place where digital literacy and citizens really understand what's being done to them, it works well. Finland's not the same as a country like the US or Canada, which are very heterogeneous, have to deal with, many different kinds of people, really different sort of contexts. Like, how about this? Growing up in a very small country where Russia or the Soviet Union has always been next door to you, they've invaded you, like, the dangers there. You all speak the same language for the most part. You're very homogenous culturally. That's a very different ask and context than how do I deal with a country with waves of immigrants, lots of diversity, pluralism is a big issue, and how you achieve pluralism. So I think they're not directly one-to-one comparable. Doesn't mean we can't learn from them, but you have to be careful. What works in one country may not exactly work in in another country. So I think that's one thing, is we are still trying to figure out what are the best interventions, and this recent research, for example, on identifying content. So we think a strong recommendation we can make is that identifying who is the source of this sort of nefarious content, that's a pretty powerful one. That's a clear one and a layup. And there likely is some kind of role between government and between the platforms. What that looks like, I don't know that we have a firm answer yet. And that's also a political question, right? Like, and I don't think public policy people, we can give recommendations on what are some likely outcomes, but political questions involve values, and when they get worked out in the political arena, right? We need voters and we need politicians to craft good solutions. And can I give you a good example of how strong or varied this is? I like to think of the continuum. On the one end, we have liberal democracies like the US, Canada, Great Britain. We have these commitments to free speech, but also commitments to not having bad things happen in the public sphere. We are really working to balance them out. And it's really hard to figure out how about this? And we have recently finished work on behalf of Google's Jigsaw unit. So Jigsaw within Google is this unit trying to reduce social harm. They asked us to help build better machine learning models to detect conspiracy theory speech online. Really cool stuff. How do we push machine learning to find and also understand how conspiracy theories work? That's important stuff. And we do not want people spreading bad information about COVID. And I can tell you, having just been deep in this data, there are some really nutty ideas. Like, there are a lot of people online in our data sample talking about how COVID comes from the Chinese government, in a lab in Wuhan. It's coming from Bill Gates and Melinda Gates. Poor Melinda's also doing it too. They're going to chip you. I mean, it's just crazy ideas. We don't want that because that's really going to affect what people do in terms of getting vaccinated, whether they're going to believe in and conform to public health rules. Huge stakes there. We also don't want to have, suppression of free speech and erosion of civil liberties. At the far end, we have China, which is draconian. There's this ever-growing list of words and phrases that cannot be used. Think about the Panama Papers. If I Google Panama Papers here, I get a lot. If I Google Panama, I can't find Panama Papers in China. I'm only going to find like the country Panama on a Wikipedia entry. It's not going to happen. But think about what happened this last week or a couple of days ago in India. So India is a country that is a liberal democracy. Free speech and civil liberties are enshrined in their constitution. But in practice, it's very, very different. And the Modi government, so a regional government within this sort of larger framework, recently arrested a 21-year-old activist who shared a online toolkit for organizing to protest, because India right now is starting to modify and reform their government control system and backstop for selling agriculture products. So farmers feel very threatened. So they just arrested a young girl for talking about organizing and protesting online. That's that middle space where you've got a liberal democracy, but they are wrestling with this in a way that looks like they're going, against our values and towards these more draconian measures. That to me is where there's a lot of difficulty. And I wonder, do we follow more of that road? Do we not? I certainly hope we don't. That's a personal thought, but I'm definitely more on the free speech side, less on the controlling people's speech side.
So am I. Bill, I'd like to just thank you for taking your time to talk to us.
Sure.
Very important comments, and I think we learned a lot from having you on today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.